More highlight is about to come. Felienne Hermans is here to give a keynote this morning. And obviously you Google people who you introduce, and I think she's one of the few people who have their firstname.com as a domain. Who of you has their firstname.com as a URL registered to you? So, and that's not the only thing Felienne has. I think she has done incredible work. She created a programming language. She has done very interesting things in computing education for computer science education, this whole space. And she has been thinking a lot how we work in the future. And I think this is probably for all of you who teach this question of students, what should I learn in order to have a job in 5 years, in 10 years, in 15 years. I think that touches on many of the questions of the future of work. And I have to say something, I will walk out on her talk, which is not because of her talk, it's because of my inability to plan ahead very well. I have a flight at some point and I have just underestimated how long it takes from here to the airport, even so I have been here plenty of times. So I will go at some point and somebody else will take the questions, but this is not of the talk, it's just on my inability to plan boat trips in a way I plan other trips. So Felienne, please, the stage is yours.
Mainly I have this domain because I bought it in 1997. Or rather, my parents bought it for me because then I was still a teenager. Okay, I'm going to talk about AI and the future of work. Who am I? I'm Felienne Hermans. I'm a professor of computer science education at VU, Vrije Universiteit in Amsterdam. And in addition to my job as a professor, I'm also 1 day a week a high school teacher in a high school in Amsterdam, where I also teach computer science. So you might sort of say that computer science is my identity. I am a computer scientist. But this is really sad for me because I don't like computer science much anymore. Basically what I will talk about today is how I fell out of love with computer science through, among other things, the AI hype that we are currently living in. And it all started really well. As I said, in the 90s I was already on the internet and programming. This is me when I was about 10. Programming a computer that my dad bought. Somehow people had told him computers are the future, so he bought one, but then he never really used it until he died. But I did, because I wanted to play computer games, but then we didn't have the internet yet, so I just got some books from the library, and I manually copied basic codes into the computer. I see a few people in the audience like, yeah, that's also how I learned programming. And I really liked programming. But I also really liked other things. For me, programming was never this one special hobby. I also really liked drawing. I draw all of these slides by hand, by the way, in case you were wondering. I also really liked knitting and making clothes. There were a lot of things that I liked. And programming for me was just one of these things. It was something where you can make something. You can make a drawing or a program or clothing. But then my working class mom was like, honey, I don't think you can get a job knitting or drawing. Those are not employable skills. However, programming is really good for making money. So maybe do you want to do programming and then you can do the other stuff as a hobby? I was like, fine. Okay, so I went into programming, which I really, really liked. And then when I was doing my PhD, I was working on spreadsheets. And this, I think, was such an interesting way of looking at programming, because spreadsheets are the best programming language that there is. Because it's such a good programming language that people don't even know that they're programming. Right? People open a spreadsheet, they make a budget, they use a sum-if, right, which is just a formula, a program. But then if you walk around, this is one of the things I did in my PhD, walking around in an investment bank, and I would say, hey, that's so cool, this spreadsheet of 150 worksheets that runs this entire bank. You're a bit like a programmer. And then people would say, no, oh, this spreadsheet, oh, that's not programming. I was like, why not? Look, it has all these programming concepts. And then in my PhD, mainly I worked on taking all sorts of technologies from software engineering, like refactoring and testing, and bringing them to spreadsheets to make sure that people that were actually programming in spreadsheets really benefited from all the work that we had done in software engineering. And I was so excited about this topic. I went to a lot of conferences like this, academic conferences, but also conferences for programmers. I was like, hey, I work on spreadsheets, and it's actually really cool what people get done in spreadsheets. I think maybe as a community of programming language designers or UI designers, we should look at what spreadsheets are doing, because somehow they have this magical capability that allows people to program without them even knowing that they're doing it. So it's like, hello, I'm Felienne, I work on spreadsheets, but then people in computer science were not very excited. They're like, yeah, but spreadsheets are not real programming. I'm like, what do you mean, not real programming? Like, am I imagining Excel? Is it not also on your machine? Like, what do you mean, not real, right? This is a thing. And they're like, yeah, but it is not really a powerful language because you can't really do a lot. I'm like, what does that mean? Yeah, it's not Turing complete. So I'm like, okay, if those are the rules, here's a Turing machine in spreadsheet formulas. Ta-da! And in addition from being proof that spreadsheets are actually a programming language, I think it's also a fantastic visualization. Do you see here? This is the head moving over the tape with conditional formatting. I think this is much more instructive of what is happening than if you would do it in a C program on the command line. Anyway, it's like, well, okay, you say it's not Turing complete. Well, it is Turing complete, so case closed, huh? No, it's not real programming. And then basically I had this conversation for 4 years during my entire PhD. Every time I said, hey, I work on spreadsheets, people would say it's not real programming. And then when I finished my PhD, I was like, yeah, I'm done with this topic. Which I still think is really a great loss, because as I said, there's so much to learn from this interface. But then I was like, this is not my fight, man. I don't want to. So then I thought, okay, I'll do something else. I'll go teach in high school. This is when I started about 10 years ago, teaching in high school 1 day a week in addition to my job in the university. And it was really, really nice. And the 12-year-olds were much more excited about programming than the programming language community. So I was like, oh, this is so cool. But then, of course, after a while, inevitably, if you're a programming languages person like me, I looked at all the programming languages that we were using in the school, and these were visual languages like Scratch, but also professional languages like Python. I thought, all these programming languages are not good. I will make my own programming language, which is what I did, and this is the Heady language. Here you see Heady, and immediately you will notice that this is not English. This is actually the Dutch version, so you have Dutch keywords. Everything is in Dutch. And this was actually a request from the 12-year-olds. They said, why is the programming language in English? And then I said, I don't know, I didn't really think about it because it's the way it is. And then one of the 12-year-olds, a really smart-ass boy, looked at me and said, but you made it. You can also make it in Dutch, right? Like, yeah, I guess you're right. So we did. We made it bilingual quite quickly. And then as soon as we had this capability, people started to upload other languages because it's all free and open source on GitHub. So once we had Dutch, we also got German and French. And then this is Spanish. This is Chinese. This is Hindi. All the languages we had, about 20 after a while. And then I did something really dangerous, something you should never do. I started to feel really good and proud of myself. I was like, oh, look at me. I made a multilingual programming language, and we have all these languages and so many users. This is awesome. Well done, you. But then, yeah, you always have people in your life. If you're happy, you have people in your life that hold you to high standards. So I have this friend, he's called Aladdin. He's from Palestine. So he's like, so Hermans, so impressive. These left to right languages. Well done, you. Now what about Arabic? I was like, dude, that seems wicked. But he's like, well, if you teach programming in Palestine or Egypt, you say, oh, we're going to do Python, then the first keyword is print, it starts with the P, then the kids might be like, what is a P? And how is a P different from a B and a D? It's like the same letter. Now, I know a little bit Arabic now, and I still confuse the ba and the ta, because it's the same letter, but upside down. So fair enough for them for confusing this. And what he also told me, and this I didn't really realize being white and Western, and from a country that hadn't really had a war with the English for a very long time, there's also a lot of people that are very well capable of speaking English, but they don't want to use English because English language people keep occupying their country or bombing their country, etc. One of the places where Hedi is used a lot is in Botswana, in the south of Africa, where the British used to rule. And a lot of people there, my age and above, were always forced to speak English. So they are now somehow reclaiming their own language. And one of the most beautiful things that someone told me about Hedi, it was a teacher in Botswana, and she said, now that we use Hedi, I can tell my students that our language is also the language of technology, is also the language of the future. And before I had to say, well, we're all speaking Setswana again because we're reclaiming our language, but in programming class we have to do English, right? So it didn't sit with them well. And I thought that is such a beautiful argument. It's not about helping people, it's also that, but it's much more about allowing them to live in their space that they want. So now I was like convinced, and also, to be honest, it was the pandemic. So I was kind of bored, no conferences, right? No parties. So I was like, fine, I'll do it. So this is what I built. I like, look, we have it in Arabic now. We have Arabic keywords, and it runs, so you can have the little drawing turtles. So I go back to Aladdin. I'm like, look, I made it. It is working. Ta-da! And he looks at this. Oh, are there any Arabic native speakers in the audience? Or just Arabic speakers, don't have to be native? A bunch, yes. Okay, you may laugh loudest at the next slide. So I'm like, look, it's done. He looks at this, he's like, cool, can you also add Arabic numerals? Like, what do you mean, dude? Let me white-splain to you what Arabic numerals are. These are Arabic numerals, surely. It's like, no, Felienne, these are Arabic numerals. That a lot of people, not all people in all Arabic-speaking communities, but a lot of them actually use these variants. And they have the same origin, right? You sort of see that they are similar. I was like, wow, I didn't know this. Raise your hand if you knew this 1 minute before. 10, most. Like, I didn't know this. And I think it's very interesting. And you can absolutely blame me because I didn't Google what numbers do Arabic people use. But also we can look at the system that we live in. I took 5 compiler courses when I was in university because I love programming languages. 0 of those courses ever told me something that a digit is not what I see as a 0 to what I see as a 9. Never was it like, oh, you also have Suffer and Tissa. So that I think is something we can look at. Hey, how is it possible that our community doesn't know this? So now I'm like, interesting, Arabic numerals exist. Let's see how programming deals with them. So this is Python, it's 2 and 9. Now I put ethnin and tissa in there. Raise your hand if you think that this will just work. 1 person, thank you, thanks. That's happy we have some optimists present. It of course does not work. And even more so, it says syntax error, invalid character. So that thing that 300 million people use, it is an invalid character. Now you might be like, yeah, but this is Python. That's not a real programming language. That's for script kiddies. But then just to convince you, I did the whole top 10 of the Tayobi index. Let's go, this is C. Use of undeclared identifier. Well, at least it's not illegal. This is C++, undeclared identifier. This is Java, illegal non-ASCII digits. Is illegal better than invalid? I don't know. C#, the build failed, unexpected character. JavaScript, invalid or unexpected token. Visual Basic, character is not valid. PHP is nice. It's a good language, I think. It takes this thing it doesn't know and it casts it into a string. Oh, thank you here. This undefined constant, I made it into a string. This will not work in the future, but it's working now. Fine, now I have a string. And then it still failed because it's non-numerical. I think non-numerical is the nicest word we've seen so far. This is SQL. I sort of had my hopes up for SQL because it's used for data analysis, maybe also in international context. Error here, yeah, I figured that by now. This is assembly. It took me a great deal of effort to build an assembly program to add 2 numbers because I hadn't used assembly for 25 years since I was in university. But then I succeeded, but also I failed because the symbol is not defined. Of course, in Hedy, this does work. Now that I know about the numbers, I implemented it. So this is admin and Tissa. It's just added into 11. And here we have a for loop. And then you might think, oh, a for loop from 1 to 0. But remember, this is not 0. This is Gamze. That's 5. And that also just works. So it was not so very hard to build this, right? I'm not even a professional programmer. I'm just an academic whose Saturday hobby got a little bit out of hand. So, but it is possible to do this. But then still, all the mainstream programming languages do not. So at this point, let's say this is 3 years ago, I'm still young and hopeful and naive. I think if I will just go to a programming languages conference and I say, hey friends, I think you sort of made a little mistake in not implementing these languages, I imagined that people would welcome this. That they would say, oh, Felienne, thank you for your input. Quickly, we will go home and we will fix our programming languages. Thank you for doing all the work. I wrote a paper also explaining how to do this and many other things. But that, friends, was not what happened. So I go back to Splash. This is the biggest programming languages conference in academia. I'm like, hey guys and girls, but mainly guys. Hey guys, I made a programming language and it's not spreadsheets this time. It is a real language. It is like Python. It just also works in Arabic. And at first they were like, why? Seriously, people come up to me and they say, can't they just learn English? I'm like, dude, do you hear my English? I am they. Right? Certainly, I am not a native speaker. I had to deal with this language all the time. I can, but I don't want to. So I explain all these arguments, about people feeling included. But then this wasn't even sort of the worst, saddest question that I got. The deeper problem was that people asked me, why was that hard? Why was it hard to do this? Because programming languages already exist in English. So it's not really a different problem doing it in Arabic. So why would you even do this? So then my first instinct, because I fought the spreadsheet wars for 4 years, I was like, I'll tell you why this is hard. Did you know about numerals? I bet you didn't know this. No, I didn't. Did you know there's a lot of different variants of Arabic? You get a Syrian and an Egyptian to agree on a word. They cannot. There's so many different variants. I was looking at the stones that are here on the island. There's Arabic pronouns on them as well, but they're not really the same that are used everywhere. So it's like, oh no, this is wrong. But it turns out it's just a variant. So you have to deal with this in a programming language. They have a different word order. They also don't write vowels like a letter as common in Dutch and English, but like a little accent that you write, but not always, only sometimes. All these things. So I'm explaining, like, please be impressed with my technical skills for doing all this work. But while I was doing this, I sort of felt my soul leave my body. I'm dying on the inside, so hanging in this ceiling, right, in this, not a nice place like this, but an American conference hotel, right, so very quickly you're already at the ceiling. And I'm looking at myself, I'm like, Hermans, why are you in this conversation? Why do you care about this? I knew in my heart that I didn't care if something is hard. Even if it would have been 5 minutes work, which it wasn't, but even then, what I care about is people in the audience, if I talk about stuff like this, are always like, wow, oh, I never knew programming could be in Arabic or in Chinese or in Italian. I'm so happy. I once had this one kid from Turkey in the Netherlands in school. He's like, but who made it in Turkish? I'm like, well, people translated it, but I sort of made it work. He's like, you made it work in Turkish? He's like totally validated that someone would go to that effort. That's the stuff I care about, not whether it was hard. So I was like, going back on the plane, thinking about it, like, that was a weird experience. And of course, I had sort of been through this before with the spreadsheet work where I wasn't made to feel very much in place. But then I was a grad student. I thought maybe it's me. But now I was thinking, hey, I don't feel welcome in computer science. More specifically, I hung out the whole week with other people that also make programming languages. I am a person that makes a programming language. How are those not my people? How is it possible that I don't feel like I fit in with other people that make programming languages? So, oh no, I have feelings. What do I do? Help, right? And then you can think, oh, let's do therapy, but it's expensive and there's a long waiting list. So I just do what everyone does. Well, this is before ChatGPT. Right now you would just text ChatGPT, but I just texted my friends. I'm like, friends, this weird thing happened to me. I went to a conference and I didn't really feel very much at home there, even though it's supposed to be my crowd. And then a few of my friends were like, Felienne, have you tried feminism? I was like, what do you mean? Again, this is about building programming languages in Arabic. Is this the right chat? They're like, yeah, but Felienne, do you understand what feminism is? I'm like, I'm a simple programmer. I have no clue. And that's sort of what society tells you that feminism is individual rights, right? Maternity leave, women quota, that there's women's dinner and events at conferences, abortion rights. And that is feminism, but this is very much liberal feminism. The idea that society is good and shouldn't be questioned. If we just get more women into this system that is absolutely flawless, everything will be fine, and women will have a great time in this fantastic system that is flawless. I'm like, that doesn't seem like it has anything to do with my issues. But then they said, well, Felienne, do you know there's also feminist epistemology? I'm like, now you're using two words I don't understand. Explain it to me like I'm 5. So they're like, well, feminist epistemology is about questioning the system. It's about wondering, why is the world as it is? And for example, feminists like Sandra Harding have looked at who is creating knowledge? What knowledge do we take into account? And I thought, oh yeah, that does look like my problem, because basically the question I'm having is, in the programming language community, what type of knowledge is valued and why? And then I found this paper, Glaciers, Gender and Science, from 2016. And this paper sort of went viral on Twitter at the time, because a lot of people were complaining then. This is, oh no, woke is coming to glaciology, right? What does feminism have to do with glaciers? Which, I mean, I was also a bit thinking this, but this paper is epic. First thing I learned from this paper, which I didn't know, is there's 2 types of glaciers. There's glaciers high in the mountains, but there's also rural village glaciers, right next to where people live. I didn't know this. Maybe people that are, I mean, clearly in the Netherlands, there are neither of those. Maybe people that live closer to glaciers have this knowledge, but I didn't know. Now, you may vote by a raise of hands. What type of glaciers do you think, as a society, we have most information about? Is this A, rural glaciers? Because they're easier to sample, so you would guess that they're overrepresented in the data. Raise your hand if you like rural glaciers. Again, one optimist all the way in the back. Thank you, sir. Thanks for playing. Who says, no, these high, hard-to-reach glaciers we have more data on? Sort of everyone. Yes, I'll point at you because you're closest. Why? Yes, they're more representative, more in the imagination, and even specifically, they can give you status. Right? So you can climb a high mountain, and then you can climb down the high mountain, and then you can go to the pub with your friends. You're like, hey friends, you know what I did today? I climbed the high mountain, and it was so cold, and it was so high, I almost lost a toe, but I did it for science. And then your friends are like, yay, Harry, right? You get status out of this. Whereas imagine your life is collecting data in a boring-ass rural glacier. Hey, Bob, how was your day today? Well, I went to the glacier. And how was it? Well, the villagers were like, hey, Bob, collecting data again. And I was like, yes, for science. This doesn't make you the hero of your story. This doesn't give you any narrative to talk about. And you see that these social factors very much influence the type of data that we collect. So I'm reading this paper. I'm like, aha, so hard stuff is valuable and easy stuff people don't care about. reading this paper about glaciers taught me more about the programming language community than existing in the programming language community for 2.5 decades. Because this is us, right? This is programming languages. We care about C++ because it's close to the metal. Right? That's a high mountain, or Haskell because it's so elegant. Actually, they're opposite. That's interesting. But they're seen as hard, or Coq, this is a proof assistant. And then the other stuff, right? JavaScript, Excel, PHP. Imagine being a PhD student in computer science and doing a PhD thesis on PHP. Like, personally, right? Imagine your life, like, hey, what do you work on? I work on PHP. But it would also be not real programming, right? Even though 1/3 of the web is PHP because of WordPress, at least until recently. So it's such a valuable topic to study, but it's not studied because it's seen as for script kiddies. So then I also, finally, I would want to say, understood why I got so much pushback on my work. I had always thought that making something easier is inherently good. But then I understood, if you live in this world, then taking Python, which is already not very hard, and making it easier is taking away value. So here's a mental frame in which making something easier and more accessible is not good. I'm like, specifically contrasted with in the 2010s and maybe the early 20s as well, so many people were saying, oh, we want more accessibility, we want more people in programming, more girls in programming and black people in programming. But then if you look at the underlying dynamics, we don't want to make stuff easier in whatever way that means. And then if you know this, then everything suddenly makes sense, right? There's so much parts of programming that have to be first made complex in order to be palatable. You can say if you are building software, then the first thing you need to do is ask people what they need. You walk around, you ask people what they need, but you cannot have the science of asking people what they need because that sounds easy. So we have to make this into requirements engineering. I don't think that it has something to do with engineering necessarily, but we have to make it sound complicated. And there's so many examples of this where something that is just inherently easy, but also soft, right? I put this easy between air quotes. I don't think it's easy. It's hard, but it has to be made sound hard. It has to go into this framework of scientific dominance. So yeah, not great. And then what you see in our field, if you look at people that are in programming, is they only care about complicated things. It's the only thing that they want to do, that they think about complicated puzzles. You hear this also, oh, I like programming because it's like solving a puzzle. But that's actually weird if you look at other professions. If you look at people that are a lawyer, maybe there are lawyers that really like to make very complicated plea deals, but there's also a lot of people that go into law because they want to help people. Or they want to contribute to something like justice, right? This abstract notion of making the world a better place. And the same is true for doctors. There might be doctors that say, well, my favorite Tuesday is a triple bypass operation. Sure, but then there's also doctors that just want to help people not be sick. Or they want to help healthcare, right? In a more abstract sense. But in programming, those people that care about people or that care about abstract notions of justice, they don't exist. They are not there. There's this super, super sad paper from 2017 that looked at what personal factors make people, 18-year-olds, least likely to study computer science. So it turns out you're least likely to study computer science if you care about social change. So already before day one of the university, we have lost the people that care about social change. They're not even coming to computer science, even though very often computer science departments have these nice slogans like, oh, mine has as well, oh, contribute to a better digital world. People don't buy this that actually care about social change. And maybe the few of them, or us, I should say, that do care about it, then you come into a curriculum and then you get, well, 5 compiler courses, 5 programming language courses, 3 database courses, and maybe 1 EC in ethics. And like, let's go, do the social change if you still care. But we don't give people any tools on how to do this. So is there anyone in the audience that studied something else than computer science? A reasonable field, like something like, yes, from the humanities? You may laugh extra hard at the next few slides. Because now, after this, I'm already well into my 40s now, right? I'm like, well. Turns out, science is not neutral. I didn't know this. Science is not the rational and mathematical field that I thought it was. And partly this is because I was very naive, but I think also partly it's because this is what I was told. That if you study computer science, specifically I studied in an engineering school, so maybe I did it to myself partly, they will tell you that science is neutral and that numbers don't lie and that as long as you measure, it doesn't matter how to do it. But this glacier example, and of course many, many other examples as well, show us that that's not true. I'm like, wow, computer science lied to me, right? And they lied about many things, or at least they didn't tell me the whole truth about many things. So here's the fun part of the talk. Who knows who this is? Yes, you may shout. Von Neumann, yes, correct. We might know him from the von Neumann architecture, which is basically how your computer works. So we might know von Neumann from this, but we also might know von Neumann. I didn't know this from the atomic bomb. He was very instrumental in the Manhattan Project, building the atomic bombs, not just helping support them, this of course many scientists participated in, but also being in the committee to select the goals. He actually wanted to drop the bombs on Kyoto because of their historical significance, and then other people were like, Johnny, that's really going too far. And also, he personally calculated the height at which to detonate the bombs for maximum impact. So this is not someone who just contributed a little bit, they contributed a lot. I didn't know this, even though I heard this name von Neumann architecture all the time. Like, I just would have wanted to know these things. Because also, currently, of course, now some people in computing are like, oh no, AI is used in warfare. How did that happen? And I sort of, it was always happening. And not just that computer science didn't tell me, it's maybe even worse. I think this is an ACM conference, right? Not an IEEE conference. Good, because IEEE. IEEE is like ACM, and they have a very nice slogan. They say, we are a professional organization dedicated to advancing technology for the benefit of humanity. Now you might say, well, 200,000 civilian casualties are maybe opposite to the benefit of humanity. You might say this, but not IEEE. They still hand out a John von Neumann medal. So reading this, like, I don't know if I want to be in this field, right? We don't have to say, oh, von Neumann didn't exist, and now we call it not von Neumann architecture. But this is the other side, right? We don't have to do this. At the very least, there could be some reckoning of the history. If you go to some countries that have colonized lands, Australia, for example, and New Zealand are very good at that. That in all sorts of academic situations, they start the proceedings saying, we are inhabiting the lands of these and these people. So you can reckon with your history and still sort of go about your business. And if you think like, oh, atomic bombs, no fun, it's not gonna get more fun. Who knows who this is? On the left, who's this? Hitler, yes. 1 point for you. Do you wanna go for the second point? Who is this? No, it's not von Neumann again. This is Thomas G. Watson, the head of IBM. It's like, hey, what is the head of IBM doing drinking tea with Hitler in 1937? That is interesting. So what he was doing there, he was selling computers to Nazi Germany, or actually punching card machines, that were used by Nazi Germany to actually do very detailed racial calculations. So they could say not just who is Jewish, but also whose parents and grandparents and great-grandparents are Jewish, and they noted this on these punching cards. And even there's correspondence between Watson and Hitler saying, oh, we used to have 40 data points, but we can go to 60, and if you need more detailed information on who is Jew in a larger, going back into their history, we can make it 80 points as well. So again, right, we don't have to not talk about IBM ever anymore, but this is the headquarters of IBM in New York, and this is called the Thomas G. Watson building. We don't have to do this. I have been in this building not knowing all of this. we have to somehow do something with it. And it's not like this is a secret or anything. This is New York Times from 1937. Thomas J. Watson is decorated by Hitler, not with the John von Neumann medal, but with a different medal. The highest award was given to him that existed in Nazi Germany at the time. And in total, IBM sold 1.5 billion punch cards a year to Nazi Germany. So yeah. And now maybe you are like, hey Felienne, what about AI? You were supposed to talk about AI, you are not doing this at all. Well, firstly, do you know how the term AI was invented? In the 1950s, there was just a few guys basically wanted to go on a summer camp together, a bit like this, but then a whole summer. So they just wrote this proposal saying, we want to go with 10 people for 2 months to study artificial intelligence, just so that it sounded very impressive. So by saying that this talk is about AI and talking about whatever I want, I am actually standing on the shoulders of giants, because that's what they did in the beginning also. But also I will talk about AI. I will, because while I was having this identity crisis of not liking computer science, AI was also happening at the same time. So now I'm looking at this AI hype with the same view, understanding finally that science is not neutral and that the tools we use shape what we do. Like, I didn't know this. So, next question. Who knows what this is? Yes, a fruit fly, in Latin called a Drosophila. Soon they will be in your kitchen again if you leave a tiny piece of banana out, and the next day you'll have 100 of them. And this is also why they were so useful. Because when people started to study genetics, they needed an animal to study. And they tried rats and mice, but they escape, and then if they escape, then they destroy lab equipment. They also tried a little worm called planaria, but the worm was like, hey, this is a lab, I will not eat or multiply. I don't like it here. But fruit flies are like, oh yeah, there's a banana, now there's 100 of us. So they were excellent to study. And therefore, they entirely shaped what we know about genetics, just because this animal likes to eat and sex in the lab. And therefore, we know so much more about what happens if two fruit flies make a next one. And we know very, very little, actually, of what happens to genes in a long pregnancy. We don't really know so much about that because it wasn't really studied. And this also, of course, very much fit the dominant masculine view at the time, where a womb is just, something raising the genes, and the female body is not actively contributing to the pregnancy. So it also fit the way of thinking. But still now we're figuring out, like, hey, what does gravity do in 9 months to a baby? We don't really know, to the genes of the baby. And then you might wonder, interesting. So the thing that we study very much influences the way of thinking about it. What about AI? Like, what is the Drosophila of AI? I wish I would have been so brilliant. But there was actually this historian of AI called Nathan Ensmenger that wondered this. What is the Drosophila of AI? You may guess, what is the thing that AI was obsessed about between, let's say, the 50s and the mid-90s. The fact that this interest stopped in the mid-90s is a clue. You may guess by shouting. Cold War Russia? I want to say somewhat, but what did AI solve in the mid-90s? The stock market, nice. No, chess. So in the mid-90s, Deep Blue, the computer Deep Blue, won a few games from Kasparov. So I mean, there was some Russian involvement or Cold War involvement, but they were obsessed about chess. And they had considered, as Ensmenger explains in his very nice paper, is chess the Drosophila of artificial intelligence? And the answer is yes. He says they considered many other things at the time. And they wanted to do machine translation as one of the things that artificial intelligence would be good at, but they didn't have the processing power, they didn't have the data yet. But chess is perfect. It's perfect for the type of AI thinking, because you can look at a chess field and you can mathematically, binarily calculate it, right? You can say, this king is under attack. This white king cannot be next to the black rook. This king is not under attack, right? Because it can be next to the white rook. So you can take a field of chess and translate it into Under attack, yes, no. Winning position, yes, no, right? Legal position, yes, no. So everything can be fit into the binary thinking of the time. But now, of course, AI is also used to assess art and writing, but you can't really say, right? You can't really, about a piece of Mondrian, say, yes, this is correct art and this is incorrect art. It doesn't work like that. But they are still taking the same methods to do benchmarking, also on language, of course, where they take some language, right? This is how AI works, and then they predict the next pieces, and they look at, is this next piece actually the correct piece? Like, is this also what's in the written text? But language doesn't work like that. We can make up words, we can make mistakes, and we're still very understandable. I'm sure my non-native English has many mistakes today, but still you sort of get the gist of it. So the idea that language can be also classified in this binary notion isn't even necessarily true, but it's coming from the technologies and the methodologies that came before it. So here, for the people that don't know, in the mid-90s, Kasparov lost to a machine, and then he was very angry at IBM, not for their involvement in the World War, but because he lost from a machine. He was like, oh, this is not even real. He doubted that a machine was actually playing the game. So science is not neutral, and we see that so much in the latest AI hype, that how we study things is already contributing to how we think about things, even though we don't really realize this. And then there are people that say, oh, but AI is more neutral than people, because people also make mistakes. But there's sort of happy news as well, and I think this is what I want to focus on sort of in the rest of my talk, to leave you with some happy news, that after Deep Blue, nothing really changed in chess, right? If you play a game of chess with a friend in the pub, and they go to the toilet, and you take your phone and you look up the next move, this will destroy a friendship, right? if the other people in the next table over, like, he was cheating on his phone, you're like, dude, right, why would you do this? And if you do this in a professional competition, certainly you'll be kicked out. So apparently this technology exists already 30 years, but we don't want to use it in all sorts of social and professional settings because we have decided that chess is for people. I think this is good. This resistance, it wasn't even hard to build this resistance. Everyone was like, no, you just don't do this. And these chess people, Herb Simon, for example, one of the early AI pioneers also working on chess, he was so happy and determined about this, right? Oh, in 10 years, he said in 56, a computer will be the world champion in chess. Like, this is what we want to go for. But we had this situation also to a certain extent for LLMs. Remember IBM Watson, the computer, also named after Watson, you know now. In 2011 already, he won the game Jeopardy, which is a TV quiz where you get an answer, and then you have to make up the question. So very much a language game. Watson could win this in 2011. And then I remember me and all my friends were like, oh, that's so cool. We're going to download this model and play with it. Oh, awesome. But then other normal people were like, oh yeah, the computer people, they build something, they can win a game. So cool, right? We don't care. So the fact that this exists doesn't mean that it has to be used in every part of life. For 10 years, more or less, we're all like, yeah, who cares? I would love to go back to this, truly. I would love to go back to, it's fine that computer people make things, but they don't have to be in society everywhere. We can just simply ignore them. We did it before, it worked. Please, let's do it again. Because we have to think about, specifically, I think, as the computer science community building interfaces and building software, we have to think about what are we doing here, right? There's this fantastic paper by Peter Nauer, that you might know from the Backus-Nauer forum, where he talks about what is it that we do if we do things? It is just beautiful. He says that there's a difference between intellectual activity and intelligent activity. And he says what characterizes intellectual activity over and beyond activity that's merely intelligent is the person's building and having a theory. So if you do something like program, for example, or write an academic paper, then you are building in your mind a theory. where a theory must be understood as the knowledge a person must have in order not only to do certain things intelligently, but also explain them, answer queries about them, argue about them, and so forth. So if you do something, then you're also learning from it. And this is what the chess people, I think, didn't really realize, that even if you're playing a game of chess, and then you win or lose the game of chess, something is happening in you, right? You might be angry, like Kasparov was at the machine. So already we see, hey, here's a thing that Deep Blue is not capable of, gloating or crying, and Kasparov very clearly was capable of it. So if you do an activity, it's not just the output of the activity that matters, it's also stuff that happens in you. So maybe, right, maybe we have artificial intelligence. Maybe we have a machine that can do a thing, but certainly we don't have artificial intellectual activity, where we also have the history and all the knowledge. And basically a lot of this goes back to the Turing test, in which Turing just said, well, the output of the activity is the activity and the only thing that matters. So now that I know what epistemology is, after my friend so patiently explained it to me, I understand that what is basically going on with AI is a form of epistemological violence. The violence that the knowledge that lives in people is taken from people and just put somewhere unaccountable. And I recently saw this, I want to say tweet, but it's a skeet because we're not on Twitter anymore, huh? So by Todd Johnson, I don't know him, but he's a computer science professor. And he says, oh, we spent months doing a careful literature review with the help of a librarian, and we completed the work, and we whittled the 7,000 citations down to only 7 that met our criteria. Then I asked Claude the question that we were trying to answer, and it found 6 of the 7 and wrote a great report. I'm like, Todd, my friends, what is it that you are saying? He means this in a happy way, right? He doesn't mean this in a not happy way. So you're saying just, oh, now we can do more science. Yay, more science is good. But also he's saying, I don't have to be accountable for the work I do. And this is a full professor in computer science saying, I don't need accountability in public, right? Just saying in public, I don't care. Because if I ask Todd, like, hey, I read your great Claude report, how did it get to these answers? It cannot defend or explain or answer queries about it in the same way that a person could do if they would do the work themselves, right? I'm truly surprised, and it's not, of course, about Todd. Many people say this. Like, what if I call you, man? I'm like, hey, tell me about this. Will you just say, oh, wait a second, I will ask Claude why you did this? This cannot be the foundation of science. I can't believe I have to explain this. And there's so many more thinkers about technology that we, as programmers, as computer scientists, we don't know about because we take the 5 compiler courses and the 6 algebra courses. There's this fantastic Nobel Prize speech by Martin Luther King from 1964. It is truly fantastic. It says, every man lives in 2 realms, the internal and the external. The internal is that realm of spiritual ends expressed in art, literature, morals, and religion. The external is that complex of devices, techniques, mechanisms, and instrumentalities by means of which we live. Our problem today, again 1964, is that we have allowed the internal to become lost in the external. And then you look at such a skeet, or you just look at our entire community, it's like, why are we doing science? Like, what is the reason that we do science? Just to produce more papers? I don't think that's what I signed up for. And then he says, so much of modern life can be summarized in that arresting dictum of the poet Thoreau. Improved means to an unimproved end. Like, so we're just doing the bad things quicker, right? Even if AI would make programming quicker and less error prone, if we're not doing the right things, what does it matter? Then it's just even worse. So then you look at this, like, this is our field, sadly. This is our field of which the people that care about stuff have been, they have chosen not to be here. So what is programming for, right? Why are we doing this? It seems to be that programming is mainly a way to make programmers feel smart and happy, and like, oh, look what I built. And to a certain extent, this is true for academia as well. What is academia for? So that we can write more papers? No. And then you have to look at what is programming? What is this activity? And then, of course, you can only go to one place anymore. What is the one place on the internet that we can still trust? Wikipedia, absolutely. So much fun, because when I was a student, my professors would say, don't go on Wikipedia because it's made by people, by which they meant not scientists. Now I tell my students, please go on Wikipedia because it's made by people, by which I mean not AI robots. But it's so interesting. And the next slide, I know you are all sort of adjacent to programming, so it will be a bit painful for you. Computer programming, oh, sorry. No, go back. Yes, computer programming, this one. Computer programming is about algorithms, step-by-step specifications, writing code in programming language. So it's all the high mountains. And then it says auxiliary tasks. Auxiliary tasks include analyzing requirements. So we're just building stuff, and then sometimes maybe we also ask people if they want our stuff, maybe testing the stuff for people, etc. Yeah, it's not the core of our field. You look at this, you're like, do we need this to go quicker with LLMs? I don't think so. I think, yes, I need to finish this. 5 more minutes, maximum. So I think programming, or also research, anything should be about caring about something and then turning it into something. That's what it should be about, like turning it into knitting or programming. For me, code is just another way to express myself. And then you look at the Wikipedia page of knitting, and that's so much different. It says, knitting is a method for the production of textile fabrics. We build stuff, right? It's nice, textile fabrics, you can wear them, they have a value. And then only later is it about really the technology, right? Of course, there are stitches and loops and needles, all the stuff that you need. But the main thing is we do something useful with technology. It's such a stark difference. And then you might wonder what goes here. It's important that we point out that these bodiless hands are a woman knitting, of course. It must be a woman knitting, and we have to make sure that it's clear to everyone who is doing this. Are there people knitters, by the way, in the audience? Awesome, yes. So for the other people not knitters, if you're like, yeah, but knitting is not programming, okay, you turn this into that. Good luck. So it is so technical, but it's never seen as this. And again, this is so much social construction. If you're a girl like me that liked this when I was a kid, I was always knitting. Adults, like your aunts and uncles or neighbors, will never say to a girl like this, oh, look at you knitting, you're so technical. But then there's a boy just wielding a hammer, and then the adults would be like, oh, you're so technical, you should go to engineering school later, right? So what we see as technical is also absolutely not neutral and absolutely socially constructed. So I'll leave you off with a few happy quotes because, you know, we were sort of sad things about the war, so let's do fun stuff as well. This is Ada Lovelace in 1843. She says the analytical engine, the computers that they were building at the time, has no pretensions whatsoever to originate anything. It can only do what we already know how to do. This is just ChatGPT, right? ChatGPT doesn't love a problem and then think, oh, I must do something about it. ChatGPT doesn't call you and say, hey, I was up all night thinking about this. It doesn't have this lived experience. Its provenance is to assist us in making available what we are already acquainted with. 1843, just, you know, gobbling up the entire internet and spewing it back out at us, it's still exactly the same thing. So the happy news, as I said, is that after Deep Blue, nothing really changed in chess, and you know who also knew this? Herb Simon, right? Because if you're truly a Herb Simon connoisseur, you will have thought, when I showed you this, oh, but that's only half of the quote. Where's the rest? It is coming now. He said, in 10 years, a computer will be the world champion in chess, unless it is barred from competition. So he was very well aware that people didn't want his machines in true competitions, right? He was already saying, oh, unless they don't let me participate, which, surprise, to no one, also not to him, we didn't. Computers are not participating in chess because we want to have this as a human-to-human activity. So we can do this. We can also say programming is something people do so that they build the knowledge and the theories in themselves. Academia is something that people do because we need to be accountable for the things that we write down. If we are not accountable as scientists, then who will be accountable? So I'll leave you with this final quote by David Graeber. Maybe you know him as the author of a book called Bullshit Jobs. If you're a young academic, please read this book. It's very good. Then maybe you do different stuff in your life, or you do the stuff differently. He says, in another book, by the way, the ultimate hidden truth of the world is that the world is something that we make. So we could just as easily make it differently. We have the power. If you don't want to use AI, please don't. So this was me. If you're like, oh, truly, I also don't like AI. I wrote a paper with a few other people called Against the Uncritical Adoption of AI Technologies in Academia. And if you want to follow me, you can subscribe to my free and also big tech free newsletter, The End.
Thank you very much, Felienne. And we have time for a quick question, but I'm sure there will be plenty. We have one, please.
Thanks, Felienne, for this beautiful, inspiring talk. I'm an hybrid profile, so in between, let's say, computer science and philosophy, so I can understand you well, I think. And for the last couple of years have been teaching a kind of introductory computer science courses to non-STEM students at university. And what I'm struggling is to understand what should we teach to students who probably will never become professional programmers, but they still need to know and to grasp important computer science concepts and skills. So, this is a problem of AI and digital literacy, basically, but my question would be, what do you think we should care for in an AI and digital literacy course to make them participate, to make them part, and convey the idea that they are part of this, activity in which we build and design and employ computer science system?
This is an excellent question. That could be another 1 hour talk, but I already stressed out the moderator, so I'll try to be super brief. So there are 2 tensions here. One tension is that if we teach people programming, to a certain extent, they will gain some mental damage from this, right? And if you want to read more read the book from 1970s, Computer Power and Human Reason by Joseph Weizenbaum, the creator of ELIZA. He clearly explains that if you program, you must think in binary forms, you must think in abstractions, you always lose outliers. So if we expose people from other fields to this, then they will also start to think like computer scientists to a certain extent, or they will drop out, right? They're just like, oh, I don't understand this. If we want people to have a critical view, maybe we should not teach them programming. Maybe we should teach them what programming is without having them do programming. I really made this mistake with Hedy as well, thinking if I teach people programming, they will then be critical of programming. I don't think that's the way anymore. So that's the first tension. The other tension is, sadly, whatever people do that aren't seen as true computer scientists, it doesn't matter. This is a sad thing, because Joseph Weizenbaum, he was even a professor of computer science at MIT. We don't talk about his work. And other people that have thought about this, Sherry Turkle, also at MIT, all the people that have been critical of AI from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, they are not in the canon of computer science. Because what people will say is, oh, they're not computer scientists. Oh, they're gonna write. People say about Emily Bender, you know, from Stochastic Paris. People say literally, oh, but she's a linguist. What does she know about language? And they say this unironical. And then you're like, they're crazy, but they're not crazy, because in the way of thinking of the dominance of computer science, the only way you can know something is if you're able to build it. So they truly mean this. So sadly, you know, I also hate this. This is also why I take it on myself to give these talks, because people of me, they cannot say, oh, but what does she know about programming? Oh, she just built a programming language. It doesn't matter if I'm sorry to end on a sad note, we can teach all the philosophers, all the programming in the world, and all the knowledge of AI. In the world that we have constructed now, they will not matter. The people that matter are the people that build the algorithms. Also, of course, in the capitalistic system that we have now. Then talk about capitalism, but I guess it's true and clear.
I'm very sorry. I'm sure there will be a lot of very interesting questions, but we have in a very tight package. I think we can go to the coffee break and people can approach you. So let me thank again Felienne.